Early on in this article, Sarah Blaffer Hrdy uses the term allomothers to describe what she's talking about. Alexa, what are allomothers?
They're pretty much like people that aren't the actual. They're pretty much like caregivers.
Allomothers, so additional mothers, other mothers, technically, caretakers in addition to the mother. And this is very pronounced. Some people she gives us a couple of examples from outside the United States of other societies in which, when asked who cares for the child, they say, we all do. We're all in this together. But according to Hrdy, this is actually a species-wide thing. And that even in our own society, we should realize that, in fact, humans are cooperative breeders, which basically means we can't do it on our own. It's very difficult to raise, well, actually, it's very difficult to give birth on your own. We're one of the few mammals that almost always requires somebody else to be present, to be helping while giving birth. It's very difficult to do this on your own. But to actually raise a child, raise infants, they require a ton of energy and a ton of care, in part because they're completely dependent on human beings for months after they come out. For those of you who've been in barns and on farms, there's some animals that come out and they're already scampering around and doing their own thing. Humans, no, we're extremely dependent. We need lots of help, especially because our brains are relatively large and we're all floppy at the beginning. So we need a lot of energy from others in order to grow up. And it requires a lot of years before we graduate to being semi-self-sufficient. Probably we never do. So, Bowden, what advantage would this give us to be cooperative breeders when it sounds like a total disadvantage? What does it enable the human beings to do? How did you get here? This is a different way of asking it. Where do we see human beings in the world?
I don't really remember. I feel like it would promote cooperation not only in birth giving, but like also as like a societal thing, like helping each other, stuff like that. That's obviously a good thing, and an advantage that in survival.
So being able to cooperate, not just caregiving, but across our species lines, is an advantage in survival. It helps us, yeah. Huh? That can be a part of it for sure. Certainly, you can have different people helping out with the sustenance of people. But I guess evolutionarily speaking, what does that enable us to do? Yeah.
Like go do stuff. Like go, if you have other people to watch your kid, you can go out and like, I guess back like like hunt and stuff, hunt and gather, and now it's like go to work.
Yeah, so you can go do different things and you're not completely tied to, you're having other people help, so you can share the work and cooperate. And I kept asking Bowden how he got here and why we got humans everywhere, because the advantage of being cooperating is
I was going to say, you focus on one value, they go up and be stronger than if you communicate with them.
All right, so we do tend to invest quite heavily in our kids, as we talked about with the Ice Age article. That's true. Yeah.
Like there's more potential partners.
Well,
what you meant by like, how did we all get here?
How do we all get here? I'm just thinking about humans spreading out all over the world to be able to move into different habitats and to cooperate in order to spread all over the place. Bones look at me like I'm crazy, but Bone, you're the one who quoted about, 6 billion people and moving all over the world and adapting to different places.
Like the last part.
Yeah, that's good. It also gives us, Cheyenne, what else does it give us? What else does it give us? Or what do you have to be a cooperative breeder? Something you should always be. If you're, what else do you need to be, or should you be? Let's say you have to do class in the morning, and then you have to do this other thing in the evening. You have to play your field hockey game in the afternoon. You have to do all these different things, be a good student, be a good athlete, be a good person at home. What do you need to do to be able to do all those things?
Time management.
Time management is important, but I'm thinking about what I thought you talked about, which is flexibility. You have to be able to
I think that's
flexible.
Time management, building.
Yeah, well, you need time management to be flexible and let's see, but you don't want to be too flexible or you'll have no time management. Need some sort of combination of those things in cooperation. Anyway, what Sarah Blaffer Hrdy is talking about here is how human beings as a species need other people's care and other people's cooperation in order to survive, in order to raise our children, in order to do things with each other and do more things. Now, this gives us some advantages, but it also can be difficult to be a cooperative breeder, so it's not always fun. Now, she talks in this article about how do you get this care? How do the mothers get the care that they need in order to raise the children? And one of the ways we do this is by living often in extended families. So our idea of what is called the nuclear family, where it's parents and children in one separate residence, is probably not very prevalent in human history, in the sense that it's not the norm. The norm is to live with larger families, at least close by. And many people that even today live in nuclear families, they live close to people who they can rely on for care. We also, in our species, and we often rely on or if we can get them to come help us out, our grandparents or our parents, to care for our kids. And, like I said, maybe you're trying to be as far away from being a parent as possible, but oftentimes the first thing that happens as soon as you have a kid is somebody from your parents' side, if they're able to, comes into town and starts helping out. So it's, in evolutionary terms, we're not entirely unique in this, but the usefulness of people goes past their reproductive lifespan. So you go into menopause, you can't reproduce anymore, but you're still helpful for reproducing the species. She also mentions older siblings, that oftentimes brothers and sisters and others are important in raising the younger children around. One of the interesting things is we hear often, and motherhood, being a mother causes hormonal changes, but it turns out becoming a father also stimulates hormonal changes. And this kind of depends on how close the father is to the infant, but it, in a way, primes the father to provide more care than they often do in other species. There are also some cultural beliefs that people have instituted in different places to kind of recruit more helpers here. And this is an interesting aspect that anthropologists call the idea of partible paternity or shared paternity. And I guess I was a little surprised that none of you were interested in this. Maybe it's a little too early in the morning to talk about this, but partible paternity is the notion that a fetus is built up by contributions of semen from all the men with whom women have had sex in the 10 months or so prior to giving birth. So I know that biologically, we know that this is scientifically incorrect, but it's a cultural belief that you could have more than one biological father, maybe two fathers. Now, you might think, well, that sounds a little yucky. But in fact, in societies where this is practiced, it usually seems that the people who have usually two fathers is a good number. Have two people that they consider to be their father, there's better odds for survival and health. So there's different ways that people recruit others, both biologically, culturally, socially, in order to provide this care, in order to help people to cooperate with each other. Oh, and by the way, one of the reasons I wanted to start out with this article is because we are talking in this section, we're going to be talking about families and kinship, gender and sexuality. And so one of the reasons that kinship and family is so important for human beings is doing this care from the beginning. It turns out that caring for a child is actually a much greater predictor of whether you're going to develop a healthy, caring relationship than if you were genetically related. So what Hrdy says is that there are sort of signals. In fact, the baby is very important in this. The babies are born and they're all floppy and they can barely see. They actually have this blurry vision. It only extends out to about 18 inches. For those of you wondering what to buy somebody who's about to have a baby, like a really good present, it's called a Stimmobile. And it's these little black and white cards that you hang up above the baby because they can only see about 18 inches and they can't see in colors yet. And so if you buy them, the baby will just focus on those. And it's the coolest thing in the world is you watch the baby focus on that, and you can change their diaper much more easily. There's parenting tips for you. Also a good gift for a baby shower. Anyway, the baby can only see a little bit. And so it actually encourages people to draw close and stare into the baby's eyes and create this bond. And what Hrdy says is that it's not the genetics that do this. Like, just because you're genetically related to somebody doesn't mean you're going to love them. It's the fact that you're performing this care for them. And the kind of the downside of this is that if a mother does not feel that she's got the support that she needs to care for an infant, if she doesn't feel that she's getting this sort of wider care, well, what happens, Phil? What happens if the mothers don't feel supported? They won't care for the child, in fact. So there's kind of a direct relationship. The more you care for the mother, the more the mother will care for the child. That's the other way to put it. So if they don't feel supported, there's going to be less care. And even probably scarier is that across cooperative breeder species, they actually have pretty high rates of infant abandonment. And that's not because people don't care about kids. It's because if they don't feel like they can make it in the world, if they don't feel like they have the support they need, then cooperative breeders have interestingly high rates of just leaving the baby alone. So what she says is the key variable is not whether you have only the care of a mother, but your total care situation, the security that you feel in that. Now, this leads her into a debate that was happening. I'm not sure if this debate is still happening in today's world, but it was a debate about daycare and about whether or not we should have kids going to daycare or have them sit at home. and whether or not that should be, and mothers should have to stay home all the time. And what she says that this debate is kind of is not the right debate to have. She says that we're going to need to have daycare, but we need to have high quality daycare, which often is very expensive or inaccessible to people. And so she says that, you know, instead of making this argument of whether the mother should care or whether you should have other care, we just need to make the whole situation better for the mothers, for the daycare, for all those people. Like I said, I'm not sure if people are still having this debate about whether or not kids should be in daycare or not. I think our times have shifted and we all recognize the need for this care, but this was her position back in 2001. Now, when we get to the end of the article, she has this quote, which Stephanie pulled out, which is a really, I think, profound quote or example of what she's trying to talk about. So she says, she first says, even if we manage to survive what most people are worrying about, global warming, emergent diseases, rogue viruses, meteorites crashing into Earth. Now, I guess I'm not so worried about the meteorite crashing into the Earth, although we did read about that asteroid a long time ago. But I have to say I am worried about global warming, emergent diseases, and rogue viruses. What surprises me about this quote is actually that it comes to us from 2001. How did she know? How did she know that there was going to be these rogue viruses and emergent diseases? This was like almost 23 years ago. And global warming, she was so far ahead of her time. Now, I guess I went back and I looked at exactly when this was published. It was actually published in May of 2001, which is an interesting time. I know this is all before you were born, so you're like, wait a second. But something happened in September of 2001, which changed what most Americans were worried about. And you've had to have in school every year, you've been told about this, right? Yeah, so this was written before the September 11th attacks. And this is what, you know, people were worried about before then. And I'm just going to say, oh, this is probably going to get me in trouble. We should have kept being worried about global warming, emergent diseases, and rogue viruses more than we spent the money that we spent on war. We should have kept our focus, I would say. And we're still in that kind of situation right now where war, bombing people, it doesn't really solve our big problems. But anyway, I think this is why one of the reasons this article is kind of sad today, because for you, you're like, hey, wait a second, this isn't my fault. I wasn't even born. You're the guys that did this stupid thing, and now I'm saddled with the problem. So yeah, depressing. Sorry. Anyway, let's go with this other part of the quote, though. Will we still be human thousands of years down the line? Stephanie, what does she mean by that? What might we lose? Why might we not be human if we keep on doing what we're doing?
Especially with the society we have today. We don't really need to constantly reduce because we have a luxury of medical care and we have like more different morals and values that lead to our higher intelligence. And especially if we keep trying to, I think, change the world in a way that's negative, we're probably going to end up seeing less co-op, like what's it called? It's Allomothers and cooperative breeder-like behavior, because most people are going to need to learn how to become more independent, because it'll be like a state of crisis.
Yeah, I mean, she's worried about how we use our various technological devices to raise our kids, to substitute for that human care. We raise our kids with, you know, how to say, different. This was 2001. They didn't even have the iPhone yet. Now we just give them an iPhone and they're happy. We don't need to give them a Stimobile. We just hand them an iPhone at birth and they stare into that for a while and they're happy. But it's even gotten worse now. What he says we risk by doing that is we risk losing our human capacity for compassion and empathy. And it's really important to stare into a baby's eyes every once in a while and to really immerse yourself in that care and help somebody out. And that's how we learn how to think about people who are far away from us and to put ourselves in other people's shoes. Empathy, the idea that you can look at something from somebody else's perspective, that you can try and feel what they would feel as a human being, even if you're not yourself in that situation. And it is, I mean, it does seem to me that since this article was written, even that human compassion and empathy seems to be in low supply at the moment. I'm hoping it will be in better supply, but at the moment I'm getting pessimistic. So we don't want to end on a pessimistic note, not on a Friday. That's too sad. So the big points: human infants are completely dependent on others for survival. They're floppy, they can't see, they can't eat by themselves, they can't run, can't hide. It takes so long. Those first 3 months of life are really unique in that way. They're completely dependent. We are. And it's that what the bigger implication of that is that the ideas that we have as a society, our cultural practices, those things we invent and circulate, are extremely important for the ways in which we are raised. And we are inculcated with our society and our culture and our beliefs during this time when our very bodies and brains are growing and developing. We're, like I said, we're very helpless and we come out of the womb with kind of undeveloped limbs and brains and all that stuff, and we grow into all of these abilities while people are holding us and singing to us and dancing with us and passing us around and letting us try different little foods to eat. And so the cultural practices that we have they feel to us as the completely natural way to do things. Now, we always have to be careful because the things that feel natural to us are because of the way we were raised. So if somebody else comes up and tells us that they eat something that we weren't raised with, and we say, ooh, that sounds yucky, in part it's because of the way that those things get put into our development and our biology. And they change how we would develop. So we would be different people if we're raised on different food, right? We would be taller or shorter or have better teeth. The other thing this means, and like I said, this is why we're reading it now, is the things like who we think of as our father, mother, parents, who we think of as our siblings, cousins, extended relatives, where we live, is important to ideas like our health.